Happy Friday, traders. This is Christian from Tropic Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for Friday, October 17th. Well, it is the weekend. Great chance to kind of take a break at this point. I think the price action was all over the place, which I will go over in today's video, and I'll come away with some conclusions for you as we had I probably classify this week as adjectives I would use as whippy, choppy, sometimes a little bit erratic in terms of what we experienced. I think even today it kind of sums up the price action that we saw, where we came in this morning and we were down about 1%, and you get a positive headline and this market kind of recovers back to unched. And then kind of a whippy first couple hours of the day, and then we kind of settled back pretty close to around high of the day, but still have some resistance to get through. So I will go through all the price action. I'll also sum up for the week. And like I said, come away with some conclusions, some bigger picture conclusions as we progress through another week of October. Please go ahead and read that full risk disclaimer. And everything, of course, that we're going through in this video is for information purposes only, education only. Also, if the video is helpful to you, please go ahead and like, retweet, and I appreciate that very much. So let me get to the spreadsheet here and just a recap of today. I'm just going to zoom in on that for you so that you can see this a little bit more clearly. All right. So a lot of a lot of colors on the top portion of the screen. Interesting was the VIX. The VIX spiked up. The VIX, as I mentioned, that we came into today, pre-market down about 1%. The VIX closed at 2078 today. That's a huge move considering we were at 20. We hit 29 pre-market. So yeah, that kind of can go with the erratic adjective that I used before. That's a big move down in volatility. The micro caps, small caps, underperformed again today for a second day. But they came back from the depths of the lows for today, and the microcaps did underperform. You could see that in red. Bitcoin was down 1.5% for today. I will review that chart because I think we're at a very interesting level, both in Ethereum and Bitcoin, and gold, which has been getting a lot of attention. Probably the two, like if you turned on CNBC this week, sorry, I'm not saying anything negative against CNBC, but I'm just saying it's very heavily watched. If you heard probably the two biggest things that you heard this week on CNBC was gold and the move in gold, and number two was cockroaches. And with Jamie Dimon's statement, they love, they. What I find interesting is, again, I am not saying anything negative about Jamie Dimon. Maybe the only thing I'll say is, while he's controls one of the biggest banks out there and a lot of assets, and he's been doing that for a long time, he's not always right. And you kind of have to, as always, make some of these conclusions on your own. Remember, I don't have the year for this one, but you could probably dig this up on AI. But remember, years ago, he was saying that I don't want to have anything to do with cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. And I don't know what level that was in Bitcoin, but it was much, much lower. So he's made some statements like that over the years that he just kind of gets a pass on. And then people forget because he's a very powerful person. And then they take whatever statement he says and they kind of run with it. So gold and cockroaches, I must have heard it 10 more times today because I have CNBC on in the background. I don't pay that much attention to it, but I just kept hearing that today. So it is interesting what the market focuses on. Speaking of which, what group did the best today from the open? This flipped around quite a bit in the afternoon, but it was the crypto group. They still finished down on the day. This is like the blockchain stocks, as well as some of the now power generating stocks too. KWeb finished up. We got some more headlines about China and that they are going to meet in a couple weeks, Trump and Xi. Oil stocks and energy stocks did pretty well. Sometimes they do that in a defensive tape. Consumer staples also more of a defensive play. I actually like the chart of Walmart. I'll try to go over that as well. Uranium stocks, and we're still seeing kind of the rotation out of some of the super hot areas of the market that got very overbought. Many of them made parabolic moves. So yeah, there's going to be profit taking, and still kind of like on the bottom of the list here. I think that's what's going on in this market. It's just cooling out of some of these areas. So I mentioned Bitcoin. Let me bring up that chart first. Let me make sure I've got the right screen up here. All right, I'll start with something different today because it's Friday. But here's Bitcoin. I'm going to just reformat this chart, but you could see that we did take out a lower VPOC. Right? These lower VPOCs act as potential demand areas. Again, whenever we the version point of control is where a lot of volume has taken place and price has not revisited. Right? Hence, it's a point of control. It's a virgin point of control because it's a point of control where price has not gotten back to. So when we return to these, when they're below the price action, it could be a demand area, right? Because that's where buyers may live. Similarly, when there's one above, we know that's a lot of times overhead supply, because folks who are kind of trapped may be waiting for price to get back up there to sell again. And it's not, there's a whole bunch of volume there, so that's why we know that they could be very significant, right? It's the biggest amount of volume in a given period. So coming down here, if you're a fan of Bitcoin, and if, even though this Bitcoin, I have said this for a couple months now, this has been very difficult. I'm not a really big fan, and I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but I'm not a very big fan of just stuff that's in a range or stuff that goes sideways. I'm a trend trader, so I like trends. I don't like when stuff just hangs around, especially wide moves like this back and forth. Now, of course, you could trade the ranges, and some people like this. That's fine. There's multiple ways to make money in the market, many different strategies. But for me, I like things that are just a little bit more of a neater trend and that have an uptrend to them. This is sideways. Of course, now I like to see when things break out of the sideways pattern. But for now, this has just been kind of, there's been a lot of traps in this. But this is not a bad area for Bitcoin. And then Ethereum did the same thing. Also took out a downside VPOC. Now, I don't like that this is below the 50-day moving average, but this is probably ripe for a bounce. Now, maybe it bounces here, and then this would be another decision area, if it does get back up there, and that would be a nice trade. That's a 10% move. But very interesting is that Bitcoin and Ethereum, they both did not do well this week. They underperformed. The cryptos underperformed for the week, where equities did recover in the beginning of the week and then basically went sideways. I posted this chart earlier, and I'm going to start with the 1 hour chart just so that you can kind of see what I mean with this market that we had this week. Right, the big alpha generating move was if you somehow like bought the lows on Friday after the close. Remember, we took a leg lower last Friday when there was an announcement about China tariffs. If you bought that low, and again, you know, that had to take over a weekend. That's not easy to do. Some people were predicting a crash over the weekend. So, um, but if you had, added some things there, then you made money. Now, if you didn't, and just kind of walked into this week, it was basically, in terms of performance, a flat week. After this move, walking in on to the open Monday morning, the average stock in the S&P 500, or the stocks in the S&P 500 basically didn't do anything all week long for overall performance. Now, they give you ranges. So again, it goes back to what I was saying before about what kind of style trader you are. For me, I don't really excel in markets like this, where they look like they're going to move one way and then they stop, they go 180 degrees and go back the other way, both on the upside and on the downside. So if you had the mindset that you were just going to sell any up moves and buy, when we're kind of getting to the lower of the range, you did well. But if you were kind of adding into a little bit of a strength this week, your results probably were not the best. right? And why do I review this? Because sometimes these things really matter in terms of whether or not you're making money, depending on what type of market. Now, if we're in a nice uptrending market like we've been over the last however many months, 6 months at this point, right? You've done well regardless because the market's been uptrending. But in a week like this, much trickier. And it basically was the same. If you go through all the other indices, here's where we started for Qs for the week. Here's where we ended, just slightly higher. If we would have stopped around lunchtime, it would have been exactly flat. And here's IWM. Here's the gap up. Here's where we finished for the week. So, a lot of traps in here. Um, it's crazy too when you look at the performance, which I'm going to show you in a minute, that IWM it was up nicely for the week. I think it was IWM was up about 2.3% for the week, which again looks a bit odd, but again, you're striking it here, right where things closed on Friday. Little bit of a lower high here, but overall, kind of start with this daily chart just to kind of give you some perspective. We're just back checking here. We're back checking into the top of the value area. So I say this in some of these videos that sometimes you'll see these really nasty looking 1 day candlesticks. As long as we don't break trend, to me, the trend is more important than a really ugly or toppy looking candlestick. So for now, we're holding above 242.96. That's the value area for the month. And I think that's important. And that's the only one, because if we go over to SPY, all kinds of, like, as we examine on that 1 hour chart, but just back and forth price action. We were not able to make it above the value area. We are still holding above support, 50-day moving average, bottom of value area, but the trend is kind of in jeopardy for now. So we're also, I think one of the big points too for next week is that we're going to really be hitting the strides of earning season. So that's going to dictate things going forward, as well as some of the other macro things on the tape. But 667.24 is the upside level to watch. And for now, the 50-day moving average is the near thing. Very close well, actually, so I have to take that back. I said IWM was the only one that did not get above the value area. Q's actually just barely, but they did it. All week they struggled with that 602.61 level, so that's a little bit of a victory there because they couldn't. Q's could not do that. But notice next week's value area is going to be very close to the value area here, so I would be mindful of that for next week. Where do I want to go next? We went over Bitcoin. Might as well bring up a gold chart too. I find this kind of funny. Well, here's the weekly chart, which is still very overbought. But as much as, look at the volume for today. So here's your ugly looking candle for the day, but we're still above the 5-day moving average. So nothing really changed there. Some bright spots for today, or some things. So I'm going to get to the conclusion kind of right away. I mentioned I would kind of give you some bigger picture things here. But here's the performance for the week. As I mentioned, IWM, I think I said 2.3, it's actually 2.4% for the week. Again, where you strike these things, if you struck these things off of the open on Monday, most of these would be kind of flattish. But from Friday's close, that's where all the gains happen for overall performance. Gold was up 5.4%. As I mentioned, Bitcoin had a really rough week, down 8.6%. But I mentioned that there's some support to watch there. Value versus growth was the same. The semis were your leader this week. And I'll tell you, like, that's not such a bad thing. Clean energy, even though some of these things really came in hard, again, it just kind of shows you how extended things were. If clean energy still finished up 5% for the week after it came in decently, same thing with gold miners, right? These things were down how much today? Almost 8%. The gold miners were down to, excuse me, that's the junior gold miners. 6.7% GDX still finished positive for the week, up 3.8%. So again, you kind of have to laugh at some of these things because the performance has just been all over the stocks, all over the place. What about quantum, which sold off? Now, quantum, this ETF has a number of other, like, mainstream semiconductors in it, not just the pure quantum plays, but that still finished up 3.7% for the week. All right. And regional banks finished down one. I mean, that's not even that bad considering yesterday's price action. Finished down 1.9% for the week. Financials finished flat for the week. How about this financial? Right? Do you think so? Here's something that do you think is bullish or bearish? Right? American Express earnings closed at a new all-time high today. Right? Kind of just shows you that I think overall this market needed to kind of some areas of this market needed to cool down a little bit. I've showed this chart every day this week. I think just the uranium chart. Right? Look at all the volume that's happening here. It's just that's too much volume. That usually means distribution is coming. That there's going to be more selling when you kind of get to the top of the page like this after a big move. Right. And I think if you go up and down, different groups, XME has been one of your best performers. This has been above its 5-day moving average for about 2 months, right? Not the 20, the 5-day moving average. So this has been a market leader down 4%. Again, look at all the volume here. XAR aerospace and defense has been a leading group. Look at this thing also. It's now consolidating. Let this thing kind of come in a little bit and maybe down to the top of the value area. That's the 50-day moving average. That might be a better buying opportunity after this group really got hot. You're going to also have some things like NOC is going to report next week. I actually like the spot right here. It's going to be tough. Might have to do an earnings trade with that one. Raytheon also has sat back. Notice when Raytheon gets back to that 50-day moving average, it's usually a good buying opportunity. Has to retake it, but maybe it will do that on earnings. Earnings will be a big decision for this stock. Robinhood. I came in long today with Robinhood. I actually, once it reached the value area, I sold it. Once it came back in the middle of the day, I bought it back. Right? Don't be afraid to do that. By the way, right? You get out of a trade if you think it's breaking down, and then monitor it. As soon as I get stopped out of a trade, one of the first things I do is I put an alert back on the name. Right? Remember, there's reasons why you should have higher conviction in some names that you trade. Robinhood is one of those higher conviction names for me, but I'm not going to be in it if it breaks down. Right? I'm not the price action rules. Just because I have an idea or have conviction, I'm still going to go with what the price tells me. But today it kind of rebounded a little bit. I did the same thing with Micron today. I sold it in the beginning of the day and then I added it back. And it actually finished flat for the day, still above these moving averages. Right? I just didn't like how the price action. I wasn't convinced that that there was gonna be anything major going on today, but you know, the price action proved me wrong because Q's finished up about 0.6 of a percentage point today. Tesla's still a tough one, but you know, I think that's pretty constructive today, up 2.5%. It's still in value. There's no major signal yet in this chart, but I am long a piece of this and we'll continue to watch. I've been talking a lot about clean energy, right, over this week and about how strong this is. Well, now you got to pull back here. So things like BE Energy, I'll be watching next week. Uh, I'm kind of like undecided about this one because it had a nice candle today, but it's still below the 5-day moving average. So what do? You kind of just watch it at this point. OKLO, I mentioned that the uranium names, same thing. Like I'll be watching to see if this retakes the 5-day moving average. Not yet. Right. And that's perfectly fine. Let some of these things breathe. How about First Solar? Nice green candle. It got a street high price target on this day, was up huge. Well, look at it now. It's moved all the way back. It's given back almost that whole day, or just about that whole day down to 231. Right. So there's getting to be, so this is, if you're in the right position now, this is still elevated, but it's above the 5-day moving average. But if you're in the right position, you want things to kind of come down. We want dips, right? And I think that this is coming right at the right time for a lot of these stocks to be coming back in a little bit. I'm just going to show you one more CRDO, which got a nice outperform, initiated at JP Morgan with an outperform rating today. Hey, this got back into the value area. Now it's got more work to do. It's got to get back above this 20-day moving average. But maybe this is kind of putting in a short-term bottom. We'll see. Again, a lot of these are kind of we'll see type things. One other one, KTOS. Right. Look at the pullback here, right down to the this has been one of the strongest names in aerospace and defense. This is a drone name, right? Look at the pullback that you've got into the top of the value area. So you've got some really nice looking charts to kind of watch and pay attention to next week. And this to me is better than when this name was all the way up here at this VPOC. Remember how I talked about these VPOCs could be overhead supply? Look at this last one. 106 kind of completely flattened this thing. Right. Well, the stock's down about almost 20% from there. This looks like a good buying opportunity to me. So that's where we're kind of set up now. Some of these things have corrected while other things have kind of held up, and the S&P went flat for the week after the gap up, right? That's a pretty strong market to me. And I think that's a good place to finish for the week. Guys, have a great weekend. And I think a lot of setups will be going over the weekend. And I'm already excited for next week. I'm also excited for the weekend to get away from the screens a little bit. Enjoy your weekend. And I'll see you guys hopefully in the trading room. Check out tribecatradegroup.com. And you could get a jump start on the week with our watch list. And I'll go over all those charts and details, provide triggers, and so on and so forth. Here's here I show this from time to time. Here's what the spreadsheet that I send out over the weekend. And I put all kinds of charts in our Slack trading room. But again, a lot of outperformance here for some names. Other names kind of reversed, and I took a number of stops this week on some trades. But hey, that's all part of trading. Have a great weekend, everybody.